Yeah. 901 Shelby Drive, look alive, look alive. Came up on this side, now they on the other side. Oh well, them dog, we gon' see how hard they ride. I get rested.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm your lead writer and host, Christian Fowler, and after a one-week hiatus, we're back with this week's episode of Tigers in 20. On this week's episode, we will recap Memphis's football team's 55-14 win over UConn last week. We'll dive into the UCF game this week. Then we'll discuss Memphis Madness festivities from last Thursday night. Then we will highlight a prep player from last week. And then we will have our Talk About segment with Go Tigers 247 founder Brooks Hansen. And then we will get into an exclusive interview with East High School first-year head coach Javonte Holmes. Last week, Memphis faced off against UConn on Saturday night, and they were in need of a big win after the Tulane loss. They came out and won 55-14. The offense came out right off the bat and scored a touchdown. But then the defense actually allowed UConn to go straight down the field and score on their first drive as well. So fans were getting a little nervous. It was getting a little shaky at first, and it looked like it might be another rough week for Memphis. But I think they responded very well after that. The offense came back and scored, and then it was pretty much locked down from the defense from there. UConn, like I said, only scored 14 points all in the first half. They were blanked after halftime. And Memphis did what they want to do in a football game. They want to control the flow of the game, be able to run the ball, and force turnovers on defense, which they forced 4. On the ground, Darrell Henderson obviously had another huge performance, 174 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. He really couldn't be stopped like pretty much every game this season. Patrick Taylor also got involved. I think his presence has been needed. Henderson said after the game that Patrick has been a little banged up, but he came back last week against UConn and was fresh, obviously. He came out with 161 yards and 3 touchdowns. And it's one thing when Darrell Henderson is running everybody over, but when you get Henderson and Taylor out there together, I don't think many teams can stop that, because you don't just prepare for the speed and the vision that Henderson has, but you also have to prepare for the 6'3", 223 that Taylor brings. When you're having to do both of those as a defense, it's hard to keep up with. They also did something really different that I think a lot of people have been looking for this season. They ran a lot of 2 tight end sets. I think they came out and every play the first 2 drives, I think Joey Magnifico and Sean Dykes were both in the game. And I think that's important for this offense because both of those guys are good blockers, but it's also a mismatch in the passing game. Magnifico, he's known more of a blocker, but he caught a 44-yard touchdown. It was the first score of the game. They've been running the ball very well, and then they came off play action, and Magnifico was wide open down the middle. And Sean Dykes also adds a different element to this team because he's very versatile. He's only 6'2", but he's very fast for a tight end, and there's not many linebackers or safeties that teams want to put in one-on-one coverage. With Dykes, I think he led the team in receiving yards. He had 62 receiving yards on the night, so he was finally a big factor for the first time this season. And those 2 tight end looks are hard for a lot of teams to defend because they were starting out on one side and moving them over, so they were moving formations all over the place, and defenses don't like to see that, especially when you have the running backs that Memphis has, and they were spreading it out, running it outside, and that's when this team is at their most effective, when they're able to get outside the tackles, because when you get a guy like Darrell Henderson outside, there's not many people that can tackle him or catch him, and you saw that pretty much all night against UConn. His second touchdown, I believe, was a 26-yarder, and it was blocked beautifully by Joey Magnifico. So having those tight ends on the field adds a completely different dynamic. Also, last week, Brady White needed to have a bounce-back game after the struggles he had against Tulane. He didn't necessarily have a bad stat line against Tulane, but he looked a little off. He didn't look comfortable in the pocket. I believe he got sacked 7 times. So he was really in need of a bounce-back game, and he did just that. He was 16 of 18, 239 and a touchdown. Not some of the stats that we've seen from him at home, but in my opinion, it was the best game that he's played this season. He was razor sharp. I mean, he didn't miss all night. I think his first incompletion was he threw it out of bounds, threw it away. Second incompletion was going to be a 50-yard touchdown to Kadarian Jones, and he dropped it in the end zone. So he was all over the field all night. He actually was making plays outside the pocket, getting around, hitting guys on the run, which is something that we haven't seen from him this season that a lot of fans have been in question of. And on the defensive side of the ball, I don't think they played the best offensive team, but I think there were some very positive signs going into the game against UCF. The biggest thing to me would be David Pendell, UConn's starting quarterback, has given a lot of team trouble on the ground this season, including UCF. In the first game against UCF, he had over 100 rushing yards and a couple touchdowns. So that was a big question mark going into last week's game. Would Memphis be able to slow him down? And I think he ended with 35 rushing yards. So they slowed him down all night. They didn't let him beat them on the ground, which is a big thing. Memphis has struggled in the past against rushing quarterbacks, but for the most part this season they've been able to contain them, and they definitely didn't let Pendell beat them this week. I think Bryce Huff played another incredible game against Tulane 2 weeks ago. I think he really had his coming out party, and he didn't slow down this game. He had 2.5 tackles for loss. He was all over the field. And the biggest thing from a guy that's looked at as a pass rusher mainly is, can he play in the run game? And Bryce Huff has been very, very good in the run game over the past couple weeks. He really plays with reckless abandon coming off the edge. You see him diving to make tackles and laying out to make tackles, and that's the kind of effort that defensive coordinator Chris Ball wants to see from his defense, and he's definitely getting it from Bryce Huff. They also turned UConn over 4 times. They forced 1 fumble. They got 3 interceptions. Carlito Gonzalez almost returned 1 for a touchdown. Jacoby Francis had an incredible one-handed interception over the top of a UConn receiver. So the defense really came back, and they also had a bounce-back performance, in my opinion. I think they played very well. Like I said, UConn's not the best offense, but to hold any team to 14 points all in the first half is good for any defense. And I think you also got to see some of these young guys play and get them in and get them some experience. So all around, the UConn game was perfect for a confidence builder. It gave this team the perfect boost that they needed going into their biggest game of the year against UCF. So all around, that UConn game was just great for this team. So this week, Memphis will have, like I said, their biggest matchup of the season. They get number 10 ranked UCF at home, fortunately. Memphis has been a different team at home this season. They're undefeated at home, 4-0. They've played very well as a team, defensively. Brady White's played well. Henderson's played well. As a team, they're a different team at the Liberty Bowl. So I think this week will really answer some questions about this team, because they haven't played a top caliber team yet. And they definitely get that with UCF. And there's a lot of things that I'll personally be looking for. And I think the biggest way for them to get a win this week or slow down this team this week is they have to neutralize McKenzie Milton. He's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. He comes into this game, and they've played 5 games this season. He's over 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and he's also averaging 35 rushing yards per game. And I think anybody that watches UCF knows that he definitely is a threat to run the football. This team, they're going to try to spread you out. They're going to run the ball. I think they've got 5 guys that are over 30 rushing yards per game. Also in the passing game, they have 3 or 4 guys that they can go to. And then they've got another guy that they kind of have in a Tony Pollard role, and Otis Anderson, who can run the ball, catch the ball. So they, just like Memphis does, they've got dynamic weapons all over the field. And the defense is really going to have to step up. I don't think this is a team that they can stop, but if they can shut them down and try to neutralize them as much as possible and give their offense a chance, then you never know. UCF will also be the best defense they've faced. I think UCF has the best secondary they've faced. They're a little bit weaker in the run game than they are in the secondary, but still it's going to be a big test for Memphis. They've played some weak defenses, including last week, when they put up 55 points. So to get a litmus test pretty much of this offense and where they stack up against the country's best this week is perfect for that. UCF is allowing 181 rushing yards per game, so I think they'll be able to find a little bit of running room. I think Darrell Henderson will be able to get them on the outside. UCF in the running game has missed a lot of tackles this season. Like I said earlier, David Pendell had a big game against him, and they were missing tackles. Granted, that was the first game of the season, but if a quarterback can make you miss tackles, then Darrell Henderson can make you miss tackles. So I still think Henderson will be able to run the ball in this game. I think the offensive line will be able to open up some holes from him. And then your biggest key, and to me what decides the game overall, is the play of Brady White. He's obviously been scrutinized this season for a couple of his games, but this is the biggest stage that he's played on this far, so he will have to step up. He has to come out and play relaxed, but be confident and make the right reads and the right throws and get Memphis into the looks that they need to be in, because this isn't a game where you can make mistakes. This isn't a game where you can turn the ball over 2 or 3 times and expect to win. They really do have to play the perfect game to pull off an upset. I think they have the team that can do it. It's just if they can put everything together and make it happen. UCF is a team that's won 18 straight games. They play well all over the field. They're very well coached. They're well disciplined. Obviously Scott Frost left, but they still got a very good team, a lot of talent. They lost guys like Mike Hughes and Shaquem Griffin, but they just reloaded. They reloaded everywhere, and they're obviously still a very good football team, 5-0, and nobody's really gotten close to them this season. I think Florida Atlantic had them almost tied going into halftime, and they ended up blowing them out. So UCF isn't a team to play around with. They definitely need to come out and strike early and strike often and play as well as they can to win this game. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I think a lot of people have already counted Memphis out in this game. Currently, UCF's only a 4.5-point favorite, so obviously there's something there that's leading certain people to believe that this should be a close game, and personally I think it should be as well. I think Memphis is still a very talented team. No, they don't have Anthony Miller, they don't have Riley Ferguson, they don't have Jannard Avery, but they have the guys and they have the coaching staff to be able to pull off an upset against UCF. And now we get to dive into last Thursday night's Memphis Madness. Everybody loved this event. It was a huge event. I expected a lot, but it blew my expectations out of the water. I knew it was a sellout. I knew it was going to be a packed house, but it was a madhouse. It was crazy. There's so much energy surrounding this program right now, and it's unlike anything we've seen in a long time in Memphis. To start it off, they did all the introductions and everything. I think every player got an outstanding introduction. The crowd went crazy for Tyler Harris, obviously. Freshman point guard, local kid, crowd went crazy for him. Jeremiah Martin, crowd went crazy for him, another local guy in his senior year. But no introduction touched that of Penny Hardaway. It was one of those moments where you get goosebumps sitting there. They do the video montage of Penny and everything. You can just feel it was building, and then they introduce him. And I've heard the FedEx Forum loud. I don't know if I've ever heard anything like that. It went crazy when Penny was introduced. I think that moment has been culminating for a few months right now, and it exploded. And it was a cool thing to be a part of. It was a great thing to see all the excitement around this program. After that, they got a little bit into the festivities and stuff. They started out with the the 3-point contest actually, and freshman David Winget won that. Like we've been saying for over a month now, that kid can shoot the ball, and I think he kind of showed everybody that on Thursday night that he can stroke it, and he's going to be a great shooter for this team. And then we got into the dunk contest. I think everybody really enjoyed that. To see 5'9" Tyler Harris throwing it down is always fun. I think everybody kind of had an idea of the hops that Ryan Boyce had, but I think he blew everybody away. He had some awesome dunks. He got some spring for sure. And then you get into the scrimmage, and everybody was looking forward to the scrimmage. Obviously, see a little bit of this team. Obviously, they're not going to show much. It's just a scrimmage and at an event, but it's cool to see it all come together, especially with all the freshmen getting to play and everything. To me, the biggest standout performance was Antwan Jones. I think everyone really knows the talent that he brings to this team. Even though he's a freshman, he looks composed beyond his years. He came out, he showed high basketball IQ, which is I think is something that people were very high on him for. He shows the ability to make great reads and great passes, and he's also a dynamic scorer. I think one thing about him that's very underrated is his dribbling. He's very good off the dribble. He's very good down low. He's just one of those guys that makes everyone around him better, and I think we'll see it at times this season. Obviously, still being a freshman, there'll be some growing pains, but Antwan Jones is a guy that can be a difference maker right away. A lot of teams nowadays are switching them, way fast, way high pace, high octane offenses, and for that you got to have a pretty athletic front court. And Memphis didn't necessarily have that last season, but they transitioned some guys. Everybody knows about the weight loss of Mike Parks, and he looked very athletic. But then you also bring in Lance Thomas, who is still waiting on his eligibility. But if he gets to play this season, I think he can certainly be a difference maker. He's long, he's athletic, he's fast, he can dribble the ball, especially for a 6'10" guy. He can make plays around the rim. And then you get the JUCO transfer in Isaiah Maurice, who's also very long and athletic. He moves very well. He adds a little bit more dynamic with his shot. He can kind of stroke it from outside, shoot a little mid-range game. So all these guys coming together, it was, like I said, it was a very cool experience. Also with Memphis Madness, I think the two biggest things that Madness is about is creating excitement in fans and recruiting. It's a great recruiting event, and Memphis had a lot of top guys in the house. I think they had 6 top 50 guys from the 2019 class at Memphis Madness with James Wiseman, Trendon Watford, Jamius Ramsey, Boogie Ellis, and the list goes on and on. They had tons of guys there sitting on the front row watching all this go down, and I think those guys got to see an electric atmosphere. Obviously, something that Madness hasn't been over the past few years, but it really was brought back by Penny. It was, like I said, it was an incredible event. It was sold out. There was people going crazy. So that environment was something a little bit different that those guys got to see last Thursday night. And last but not least for Memphis Madness, I think everybody knew Penny would go out all out on the entertainers, and he got some great, obviously, guys to rep Memphis guys. It started off with Moneybag Yo, and he's a big Memphis guy. Everybody loves Moneybag, so when he came out, it was pretty hyped. That was the first performance, and then during Penny Hardaway's introduction, Derez Deshawn came out with his song Hardaway, and that was one of those moments that was really cool to see. I don't think anybody really expected him there. So for him to come out with that song with Penny coming out was awesome to see. And then you get Block Boy comes out there, has everybody doing the shoot, everybody dancing. It was just one of those hype moments. Had the whole team dancing, had former players down there dancing, Anthony Miller dancing. It was nuts to see all that come together at one time. And then they ended it off with, of course, Memphis OG Yo Gotti comes out and performs to pretty much cap the night off. So the entertainment was wonderful. Like I said, I think everybody expected Penny to bring in some guys that will, one, rep the city, and two, put on a good show. And I think they did that. I think it brought everything together perfectly. Now we'll get into our prep segment. Last week we obviously didn't have an episode, so we didn't get to highlight a player. So I want to go back to 2 weeks ago and talk about Fairleigh High School running back Terry Wilkins, which I know we've discussed him on the show previously, but the game he had 2 weeks ago, I don't think it can go without being discussed. They played Maz at home at Fairleigh, and he had 24 carries, 350 yards, 6 total touchdowns. He had an incredible game. He's having a great junior season. He's a class of 20 guy, running back, 5'9", 180. He's had an incredible season. Like I said, he played as a sophomore at Fairleigh and had a great year, but he's really settling down and coming to his own under head coach Gene Robinson. I actually got to go speak with them on Tuesday afternoon, talk to a little bit about Terry's progression at Fairleigh, and he's very thankful to be there. He's very thankful to have Coach Robinson, and he's really working his butt off to be an incredible player and to get noticed by some college coaches. He was talking a little bit about working on his speed, working on his hands, really becoming a complete running back. I think he showed that this season that he can be a complete back, and he's starting to get offers. He's starting to get schools look at him. I know he got offered by Southern Miss back a few months ago, so he's a guy in the city that's really starting to get some love and really starting to show people that he is that type of player that can go play at the next level. He's cut up, he's ripped up. He can do a little bit of everything. He's fast. He's powerful. He's one of those all-around running backs that college coaches are looking for now. And next up, we'll have our Talk About segment with Go Tigers 247 founder Brooks Hansen.
Welcome to this week's Tigers in 20 Talk About with me, Brooks Hansen, your founder and co-host with Christian Fowler. So this week we wanted to recap a couple things that happened last week, specifically related to Memphis Madness and the events leading up to Memphis Madness. So first I wanted to really just dig into and talk about the things that happened in media prior to Memphis Madness. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. I'm not hiding from it. So Jason Smith's report that Justin Timberlake and Drake. Yeah, I'm not great with rappers, so you guys know that. So Justin Timberlake and Drake showing up to Madness, and obviously that report ended up not coming true. And so there's two parts of the story. First, on Jason's side and his defense, you can only share and report what your sources are telling you. And when you feel like you can trust people and they're telling you things that you feel like are legit, you sometimes feel like you have to go with it, especially in an industry where right now in the city of Memphis, there's so much competition. There's competition from local guys, there's competition from national guys, there's competition from just blogs that are trying to break stories. So from his perspective, I get it. On the flip side of the coin, though, one of my main issues with Jason Smith's report is that it created unfair expectations for Madness on multiple levels. One, for fans, yes, they were going to be there regardless. I don't have a dog in this hunt, so let me just clear that up. I'm not trying to badmouth Jason and John. They do a great job. Their show, and everybody knows, I've had my own issues with John Martin in the past, and we're beyond that. They do a great job with their show, get tremendous guests, and that's what really drives their ratings, and that's great. There's a difference for them though with breaking news and with having on tremendous guests and getting perspective straight from the horse's mouth. So I get that side of it. I'm not trying to bash them or belittle them. I think they've done a tremendous job with the guest portion of their show. My big thing though is that story created a narrative that became about Jason Smith instead of about Memphis Madness. So after Madness was over, Timberlake and Drake don't show. The entire story afterward is not about what a tremendous night it was, what a celebration it was at Penny Hardaway, about the recruits that were there. The story was, how did Memphis let that happen? Why did nobody at the school say anything? The Daily Helmsman's, it was original and thought-provoking, but a horrible take related to how could the university profit and sell tickets, and somebody's got to answer to the way that they handled this. So when you shift the story from being about that night and the actual events to yourself and everybody talking about Jason Smith's report, what was true, what wasn't true, and then it turns into something that it shouldn't be about, to me that's a failure on every level. So personally, I probably wouldn't have reported that. I think it's time to move on though. The reality for the big picture with Memphis and the purpose of that night is recruiting. And do I think Jason Smith's report is going to hurt recruiting? No. I think that there was probably some discussion of it with recruits and other coaches trying to belittle the Memphis program and saying that it was, kind of a shady way to get people to Madness or whatever. There might be some of that out there, but bottom line is that type of rumor is not going to be the reason that a recruit does or does not pick Memphis. James Wiseman isn't going to pick Kentucky if he does because of that. It will be for other reasons. And he's not picking Memphis because it did or did not happen. He's not going to pick Memphis if Drake and Timberlake are there. That's not how it works. So all of that said, I think we can just go ahead and move on. There's no need beating a dead horse. Somebody tweeted at me last week whenever I kind of chimed in on it, and I said, it's not that deep. And the reality is, it is in the moment, but it's not long term. So I just wanted to kind of recap a couple thoughts that I had on it. But moving to the actual really important aspect of last Thursday night is recruiting. Obviously, anybody who's on our VIP section of Go Tigers 247 has seen the commentary we have and have not had on the recruits at Madness. And so I wanted to kind of quickly cover a couple thoughts from Madness last Thursday. One, James Wiseman isn't deciding based upon Madness. That's not how that's going to work for him. So you can just ignore any kind of talk about James Wiseman and what he did or did not experience in Madness last week. Moving to what I think is probably the second most pressing story right now coming out of Madness and recruiting is DJ Jeffries. Everybody knows he was there on an unofficial, already did his official, and came off of his visit to Alabama this past weekend. I continue to hear that it's essentially a coin toss between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. And, you can take what you want from his dad's comments this week that it's Memphis, Alabama, and Mississippi State. But, from my perspective, if you look at the track record there have been things said. For example, Alabama is out, the distance is just too great, probably won't take that visit. Did that happen? Did I think that was true? No. And yes, he did visit Alabama. He is now, according to Corey Jeffries, DJ Jeffries' father, heavily considering Alabama. So things said in the moment I don't think are necessarily always true. So we'll see. I do think that a decision will be coming very shortly. Next, you kind of have a crop of guys that were from out of town. You got Trendon Watford, you got Jameis Ramsey, you you got Boogie Ellis. Only Trendon Watford is a southeastern guy. He's an Alabama guy, and I feel like I have a special ability to speak into that recruitment. And I'll be honest, I think that if Trendon Watford were a done deal for Memphis and he were heavily favoring Memphis, that commitment probably would have already been done. I could be wrong, but I do think that there is a lot at play in stake for Alabama, for Avery Johnson. That job is starting to get on shaky ground, if I'm just being honest and calling it what it is. So Avery Johnson really needs to keep Trendon Watford home. And everyone talks about the relationship between Mike Miller and Trendon Watford and the connection there at Memphis. But when you look at it big picture-wise, Trendon Watford has had a relationship with that staff since they got there. That was one of the first guys that they began recruiting, and I really think that there are some pretty deep ties. It's going to be really hard for Memphis to pull Watford away from Alabama. If they do, though, that's a massive recruiting win. Watford is so skilled, so good. He's underrated from my perspective. I tweeted about this when he dropped in the rankings, and I really think that he will be one. There's no use in commenting on what Madness did or did not mean to him last week, because what's true now is not going to be true in the spring when he actually decides. Jameis Ramsey, Boogie Ellis, Precious Achiuwa, 3 wild cards for me. I think Memphis has a great shot at all 3 of them, despite being kind of under the radar and not much chatter about them up until they kind of like randomly exploded and said, hey, Memphis is involved. You know, we brought this story last week about Achiuwa visiting, and nobody really knew that Memphis was in on him until that story broke. Same with Jameis Ramsey. Jameis Ramsey, it came out that he was being visited by the Memphis staff in Texas, and then we broke the story that he was coming in on an official visit, and nobody really had much of an insight into his recruitment and how much Memphis was involved. But you look at the fact that Ramsey, one, canceled an Indiana late-night visit, the Hoosier Hysteria, in order to come to Memphis, and then also rescheduled his Miami official visit. So obviously they have a shot. They got him on campus. It was an official visit, and Ramsey has kind of been rumored to Louisville, and I think that they ended up taking somebody else, and because he was not ready to commit. Texas Tech has also been heavily involved, and Miami. So we'll see. That's an interesting one to follow. Boogie Ellis on campus at North Carolina this weekend, and then at Duke at the end of the month. I think if Boogie Ellis leaves the West Coast, it will come down to those 3 schools, obviously, Memphis, Duke, North Carolina. And with the way that you've seen USC's recruiting class shake out and Arizona's recruiting class shake out, I don't think it's completely absurd to think that Boogie Ellis could leave the West Coast. So that's all I've got for this week. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.
And now we'll have an exclusive interview with first-year head coach at East High School, Javante Holmes.
Javante Holmes, new East High School basketball coach, head boys basketball coach, also owner, Game Changer Basketball, professional NBA trainer.
Everybody in Memphis knows about your new role as the head coach at East
Yes,
High School. So tell me about your history. Tell me where you grew up. How
Okay.
did you get into basketball?
Okay. Well, I grew up in Memphis, North Memphis to be exact, Hollywood. Early on, I was a football guy. Started playing football, then grew into basketball. You know, every neighborhood had all those rivals. So I was going to Hollywood. We used to have rivals with Douglas and Hyde Park in basketball. So the level of intensity grew, and I started to fall in love with basketball. My first experience as far as coaching was through AAU. Frank Harris with the Memphis War Eagles gave me a start at AAU. And I had a team that I coached, my first team that I head coached. It was with Ian Clark, who's playing for Golden State right now, and probably her name you heard of, Farrakhan Hall, that played for Memphis. Now he's playing for the Chicago Bulls D-League team. So that was my first team. And they were about 13 years old. So at the time, you know, with that group, it was real fun group, and really just fell in love with coaching all together. My first high school, I played at Raleigh High School. Jimmy Adams was my mentor. I met him years ago. He used to coach at the old Memphis State. Larry Finch had a basketball camp. Larry Finch basketball camp we used to go to every year. It was a big to do. And me and Coach Adams actually built a relationship from there. He came into high school coaching at Raleigh High School. When he got the job at Raleigh High School, me and him always kept in touch. So when he got the job at Raleigh High School, and I found out he was getting the job, it was a no-brainer to go over to Raleigh High School.
So how did you get into the skills training side of things?
You know what? This how it happened for me. With that group with Ian Clark and all those guys, I was training those guys. Ian, you got to think about it. Ian got cut from every team he ever went to. Got cut from middle school, and we talk about this relationship all the time. It was just something I seen in him. And while he was playing and coming into middle school, he continued to grow, get better. We stayed in the gym countless hours. Me and Farrakhan stayed in the gym countless hours. While I was coaching them, and it was the 8th grade, I had Jarnell them coming up in the 5th grade. So I had that group with Jarnell them, so I was just always in the gym with them, coaching and training them. So I never forget when Ian got about to his senior year, wanted to college, he said, man, you need to be my trainer. And it just clicked on the idea, like, I need to be a trainer. And so with those guys, with Ian and Jarnell, they started my path. They started my path as far as training. So
what is it about skills training that you enjoy so much?
The finished product. You know, you seeing a kid, for example, like I say, I always bring up Ian Clark and Jarnell Stokes. Ian Clark was being cut from team to team.
He's an NBA champion.
And now he's an NBA champion. Wasn't a top 200 kid coming out of high school, and just kept on getting better. Now he's 6 years in the NBA. Jarnell was a kid, just big, really didn't have a skill set. By his 10th, 11th grade year, just blossomed into a player. And, you know, he had some stints in the league, but he's playing professionally overseas. Now he's back with Miami Heat. So, you know, just to see those guys, you know, the finished product, continuous work, man, I knew I had a proven method that can help kids get better.
So what are your expectations for East this year, the East basketball program this year, and what are some expectations you have over the next few years?
No different from when Penny Hardaway started, from when Des Merriweather started the vision, from Leicester Middle School, the dominance, to East High School, the dominance. It's no different. We all share the same visions. It's no different. You know, be a national powerhouse, win state championship after state championship after state championship. So it's no different.
What are your aspirations as a coach? Like, where do you see yourself progressing up the different levels?
You know what? I never thought about progressing up. You know, my aspiration is to help my kids get D1 scholarship, or just get a scholarship. You know, I just want to see them go to college and better their lives. You know, if the next level happens, it happens. You know, I wouldn't go away from it. I didn't aspire to be this NBA trainer. I thought about it. You know, I worked hard. I worked relentless at it. I'm gonna work relentless as being coaching, and it's just the clients end up coming. You know, so when you do something pure from the heart and you put the time in and you work relentless at it, I think good things gonna happen and good things gonna come from it. So.
And that's it for this week's episode. Everybody remember, Saturday afternoon, 2:30 kickoff for the Memphis versus UCF game. Come out, support. Should be a great game. Should be a great atmosphere as well. And also don't forget to head over to GoTigers247.com. Check out the message boards. We got plenty of coverage for Saturday's game against UCF. We also still got coverage on there for Memphis Madness and Media Day for the basketball team. So from recruiting to football to basketball, we got you covered. So make sure to go check out all that good information.
Yeah. 901 Shelby Drive. Look alive. Came up on this side. Now they on